Welcome, Paula. It's fantastic to have you here today.
Thank you, Katie.
As a negotiation trainer and expert, I feel that the most logical place to begin is how do you define negotiation?
Well, I always start by defining the words and the situation, places where we are. Negotiation, it's a situation where you are with another counterpart, and we need to understand if we have a common ground, if we have a zone of possible agreements, and then decide to create value or not. Generally, people tend to see negotiation as a win-lose situation, that I need to take something from you in order to win the situation, but it's more subtle than that.
Hmm. You were also saying a bit off air when we spoke before that it was a science and an art.
Well, in fact, yeah, it's a couple things. It's a kind of discussion that we used to have between negotiators. That how do you define negotiation itself? And it's a science because we have been studying it for many years now, and particularly with the Harvard program on negotiation. That's a big structure, very with a high reputation. But it's also an art because you can only learn and improve yourself only by doing it. You can read all the books in the world if you want. If you don't practice it, it doesn't worth anything.
Yes, I really feel that in the case of negotiation, it's a skill that you get from practicing. Like you said, you can read all the theory, all the book, but if you're not there in the situation, you won't really improve, like many skills in life. So, what would be your three key tips for someone who literally feels they're terrible at negotiation, can't negotiate their salary, can't negotiate in a marketplace for the fruit and veg in Asia where they negotiate all the price of fruit and veg, in Europe less, and so they feel like they just can't do it. What would you be your three key tips for these people?
Well, that's a very tough question. Just to limit that 3 points and 30 minutes, it's pure torture. Let me know. So, first point is that, as we said, negotiation is a skill. So you are not born a good negotiator or a bad negotiator. It's just that you don't have the mindset and the methodology behind that. If I ask you, write down a sinogram, you are not going to tell me I'm bad at Chinese. You just tell me, I don't know. I don't know how to write Chinese. Okay. So that's exactly the same for negotiation. It's not because you are doing it all the time that you do it properly. There is a method behind that. I used to compare that to nutrition. We used to say, okay, just I eat 3 meals a day, but it doesn't mean that you know how to eat properly with the good nutriments in the good way. It's exactly with negotiation. So we have an art and a science that you need to master first. So you can't say until now if you're a good or not good negotiator. You just don't know. You did your best with all you had according to people and the environment around you. First point. The second is that there is a methodology behind that. So once you know that the theory is necessary, we were saying that it's not enough. That's one point, but still it's necessary. Why? Because once you have the structure, it's like when you are learning to play piano. You need to train your fingers, to train your body to get the movement and then to improve that movement. Here we have the methodology, and then we start as when we were toddlers to make the first steps. So the first steps in negotiation is to understand first that you need to prepare it. A negotiation, it's 80% of preparation. After, it will be according, it's a kind of dance. It's according what you have, your counterpart, and the information that you can gather at the bargain. But before that, you need to know many, many things. And the two only things, because you are torturing me, I want to tell you that the two main things that you need to prepare if you don't have time or you don't know how to do it, just two questions that you need to ask yourself is, what are your non-negotiables in that situation? So what's the really minimum threshold that you refuse to go below that? And also to define your BATNA, your plan B. So what I'm going to do if the negotiation fails. And that's where you have big part of your negotiation power. This is also why lies and bluff exist, to make the other feel that we have a plan B, but in reality is that we don't have it. So what's your minimum level? What's your plan B? And with that, normally you could do a little bit of negotiation that at least will protect your interests. Then a last aspect, because I'm Colombian, so I never respect the rules. is also about, we were saying, your inner dialogue. If you start negotiation saying yourself that I'm by negotiator, I don't like that, or I'm never successful at that, well, try to guess what is going to happen. So try to switch that inner dialogue by asking yourself different questions, like just curiosity. What the other person has to say, what the other person wants, what I get, what I have, what can we exchange, you know? Negotiation is, before everything, just a trade situation. We exchange information, and then we exchange services against money, against goods, you know, it's an exchange situation. So if you take curiosity instead of fear or I don't know, kind of apprehension of the situation, that will totally shift the way you will feel and experience the situation.
Yes, I love what you said about the walking away point, or the non-negotiables, because I feel that if that's anchored in your mind with the plan B, your negotiation is going to be so much more solid, and the other person will feel, okay, if it falls through, they're still okay. And that will make them want the negotiation to work somehow. It's a weird psychological dynamic.
In fact, why I used to work with people that are not familiar, don't feel comfortable with negotiation. And why I stress that much on plan B is exactly because when you don't have plan B, there is a kind of psychological game that can start with your counterpart. If they feel, or even they know, that you don't have a plan B, what happens next? You feel like they can put you at the edge of the cliff. So it's the death or my proposal.
Yes, it is.
It's a real situation. This is how emotionally you feel it, how the sensations and the stress that you feel in your body is like, okay, I just have no other choice than to accept what he's proposing. Plan B, it's the door, it's the cord, it's the plane, it's the helicopter, call it however you want in that situation, that helps you to get out of the situation and say, no, I have the freedom and the possibility to say no. And that's where your power is.
What got you interested in this field to begin with? What was your interest in the field?
I heard an interview of Marisa Peers, an English psychologist, saying that we used to choose, when you are really aligned with your profession, you used to choose something that you were very interested in when you were between the age of 7 and 14. And in my case, I was not interested in being, I don't know, doctor or firefighter, I don't know. I was just kind of the one who was helping the helpless friends at school and trying to establish justice. This is why I like a negotiation, saying, okay, there is a technique, there is a method that we can apply that can help. And we need also to be audacious, you know, to try and to go and to jump without any security or being sure that we will fall on our feet. And so this is why I like negotiation, just reestablishing the power at the beginning. Say it's not because you are the biggest one, or because you have the more power and more money or more whatever, that you are going to take everything from me. And we can still, you know, reestablish that kind of equality and respect. That's also from the French side, you know, the egalitarian side.
Yes, equalitarian. So about the justice, the equality, and bringing things to a sort of level of fairness.
Yeah, it's a lot about personal value, fairness, and justice.
Nice. Yes, I think that's a lovely way of looking at it. What do you feel are some of the pitfalls of negotiation?
Well, the first one is that thinking that when we are merchandising and saying 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, it's negotiating. That's definitely not. Sorry to say, but this is also what made me feel happy to do this profession, because that was not negotiation. So, well, that's the first thing that we need to have in mind. And the second is that once you understand, because negotiation has also a lot to do with the how familiar you feel with the psychological mind and the structure of the psyche. Once you get that, you can have a superpower. So you need to put negotiation also with ethics and to do it in the proper way. So there are many negotiators in the world. They use their superpower, because this is what really is, in different ways, in diplomatic areas, in kidnapping negotiation, in commercial negotiations, in many, many fields, in positive, less positive ways. And it's really, you know, very personal way of doing the negotiation, and you can find everything on the market. But for me, it's one of the pitfalls, definitely.
Yes, yes. I like the way you say that it's a superpower, the superpower of negotiation. Do you remember a time when you were studying this field and getting familiar with the topic? Do you remember a time where there was a switch in your mind and you could feel this sort of superpower?
On definitely on the thresholds, studying the thresholds and saying that, you know, you were not supposed to ask higher in order to, you know, the merchandising thing that I was saying, but that according to the person you have in front of you, you decide which strategy you are going to apply to explain your offer and to anchor first or second, what methods to use it. Definitely anchors were like the moment say, wow. It's a new word for me.
It's such a lovely feeling when you start to learn a new topic and that you're really passionate about it, and then you have those all those epiphanies coming through.
Well, for me, the most interesting epiphanies come reading books from Jonathan Powell, who's a very famous negotiator in the UK. And we are talking here about peace processes negotiations, you know, so very complex, about negotiation, long-term negotiations, identity shift negotiations. So how do you create all that environment that will help people to go to this new situation, which is called peace? So obviously, when you are not involved in the war, it seems obvious to you that we need peace. But when it comes, and it happens in my country for the last 50 years, when it comes something so natural, you know, that we are sharing from generation to generation, then we know that we define them as our enemies. We need them to define ourselves. So for me, it's really conflict resolution negotiations that have been the most interesting field to grow with.
Oh, so beautiful. What a lovely way to, use your time on earth and your skills to help, peace in the world. I mean, I think it's what we all want, or what we should all want, but then who am I to judge what we should all want? It just feels like the idea of, world peace. Anyway, I should probably not debate world peace on my podcast. So let's come back to negotiation.
That might become a little bit political for you.
Yes. Yeah, I tend not to go in that direction, though. I hope that all of my listeners at least agree with this one political view of mine that I share on the podcast. Yes, wonderful topic, negotiation. I still feel that it is misunderstood, like you mentioned at the beginning, in terms of this win-lose mentality. So I love the way you mentioned that it could be seen as a trade-off and an exchange. And what other sort of perspectives have you discovered through your negotiation training that have helped you to really sort of see it as a trade-off and see the whole field more clearly, and not just as this win-lose battle perspective that some people have?
Well, the point to make a link to our previous conversation, conflict resolution, is that it will depend on how comfortable you feel with dealing with conflict on your personal life, and negotiation can have moments of tension, of disagreement. So I'm proposing that you disagree, or I don't know why I think so, I said something that hurt you. I'm not responsible. It was not my intention, but still I feel that you feel hurt, or, a bit resentment about what I said. That's situations that you need to handle. So there is no win-win situation all the time. There is no win-lose situation all the time. You have the two limits of the spectrum, and you have a total possibilities, many of them in the middle of the two. So what happens is that you need to be a good negotiator first, to know yourself. What I'm able, what I'm capable, what are the situations, the emotions, the words that trigger me. You have people, many women are triggered by anger. when they see that there is an angry person in front of them, just they freeze and they don't know how to handle the situation. For me, it's not anger. I'm Colombian, and my family are very explosive, so conflict is my thing. I no problem with that. But if I have someone who's lying or doing bad faith in front of me, you know that I know that you're lying and you continue, that's my trigger. That's milliseconds, and just okay, so I need to cool that, but I know that. So I'm aware in this kind of situation because I know myself. The other point is to know the person that you have in front of you. The person in front of you, it's not your friend. It's maybe the first time that you are negotiating with a person, but you need to use your sensitivity. You need to be subtle. You need to analyze the different, as little as elements that you have, but you need to analyze them in order to know if you can cooperate with that person or not. Because you are not turning a shark into a red fish. So you need to know who is in front of you in order to better choose what is the strategy that you are going to use with that person. Imagine I try to cooperate with a shark. What is going to happen? We are going to create tons of value at the bargain, for sure, but he's going to leave with everything. Quite the opposite. Imagine I feel comfortable and I just try to be competitive with someone that doesn't like that. The negotiation is going to shut down because the person felt, in danger or betrayed or, negative energy around. So don't want to put that at the bargain or don't want to create value with me. So it's not only about the person, it's about the combination of the person and what we create. It's like in chemistry. You take an atom itself, it doesn't mean anything, but you put it with another atom, it gives a kind of material. With another atom, another reaction. With another atom, another reaction. It's exactly for human beings. So you need to know first yourself, and then to do your best to analyze the person who's in front of you in order to know what kind of strategy you can use for this negotiation.
It sounds like you need high levels of empathy and high levels of psychological awareness to pick up
an observation more than anything.
But observation that you can interpret, because I think sometimes we can observe that the person crosses their arms or looks downwards or looks upward, but if we don't know how to translate that into what it could mean, then we're just observing without any real information.
Well, I'm also mom of a little girl who's 4 years old, and I've been very interested in that childhood psychological and all these elements. And I quite disagree with you. I tend to think that we naturally know how to interpret our behaviors as a kind of mammals and social animals that we are, but are the different filters of listening to ourselves and the social norms and the cultural norms and all the stuff that make us lose that real meaning and interpretation. Paul Ekman wrote books about the international aspects of emotions, and it's very interesting. So yes, we're not going to express anger in the same way in France and in Colombia than in Netherlands than in Poland, certainly not. But you have things that are going to show you that the person is angry. So that's my take.
Yes, it's a good point. I think it's true that we probably do know, if we pay attention and observe, we probably don't need to have read a lot of theory about it to be able to interpret. We probably just feel it. I think we can also quite naturally sort of interpret, the body language or the facial expressions, again, without having studied. If we just really pay close attention, we will know, are they feeling, upset or happy or excited? We can read these things. It's a good point. And you mentioned different cultures right now. What are some of the interesting aspects of different cultures in the field of negotiation?
Well, in the negotiation field is in fact one of my center interest on negotiation is that cross-cultural negotiation aspect. Because as you know, you're also a very international person. There is a very interesting TEDx called "Our Languages Shape Our World." So your language defines what you see, and what you see is what how do you interact with the word. There are some cultures that living in the Antarctic. They have even 17 words for the word white, because white means a lot of things for them. It can be a beer white, it can be a house white, it can be snow white, it can be a whole white, it can be so many things. So white means a lot. For us, there's only white. It means white, or white beige, or white, or white gray, but it's still not white anymore. So the perception of the word and the rules are laws. How do you define them? It's how do you interact with them. So if I want to negotiate, so let's compare it to two different worlds, okay? So we can live differently, and as long as we are at certain distance. When we are negotiating, we are gathering together. So I need to understand what are the rules in your world and how do you see and perceive the world. So it can take ages and years, of course. We need to make it short to make it, how people can use that. There is I have one advice on cross-cultural negotiation is the book Cultural Map from Erin Meyer, who wrote a study after an international survey about 8 different characteristics for each culture, how they relate with time, with space, with hierarchy, with organization, and the whole list of different elements of how do you see the word towards that aspect. So I'm just going to take one aspect here because this is the most interesting one. It's about time. So there are, from one side, the low context cultures that are on monochronic cultures. So they see time as linear. So I do one task and then the other and then the other. So time, minutes are important, say if it starts at 11, it's 11, and it ends at 12, it ends at 12. High context culture are polychronic cultures. So for them, or for us as Colombian, time is not linear. Time is not that important. Chronos, it's not our God. What matters is the relation. So time is a kind of very strange element that we can all the time dance with. And 9:30, 10, no problem. It's somewhere around that. And it will end around 11, 12, 1, 2, maybe 3. That's because we have a different relationship with time. So if I don't define time in the same way, if I'm, I don't know, a German person who has very monochronic relationship with time, and that I go to negotiate with a Brazilian person and that the person arrives 30, 40, 45 minutes late, I will obviously feel hurt because for me it's a lack of respect, but it's not at all for the person, because if the person arrives 45 minutes late, they will probably leave 1 to 3 hours later than expected. So there are elements where you can focus in order to not get biased in your interpretation of the interaction with the person coming from the other culture. You have also other cultures where that's more the Asian cultures, where it's important to not make the person lose the face. So not hurt, not insult, and obviously the person is not and never going to say no. So how do you deal with that? Well, you have to collect clues to understand where the negotiation is going. Otherwise, you don't have any other solution, because you will never have a no direct and clear one. At the same time, if you give them a no, you will hurt them because it's not on the culture. So it will be very disrespectful to say in such a direct way, no, I don't work to work or to make the deal with you.
Yes, I think it's funny because a lot of people know these things. They might know that certain cultures have a more relational aspect of time, and some are more like punctual, and they might sort of know it theoretically speaking. But I think when it happens to them in person and in a negotiation or in a work context, it's hard for people to adjust when they have all their whole identity sometimes is based on, I am a punctual person or I'm a reliable person. So sometimes it's on identity level, then on a cultural identity level, then years of habit, then, you know, the patterns, the neurological patterns. And so all of that in the moment, I think it takes really strong awareness and preparation, mental preparation, that this is a possibility and that it might happen, and so that they know ahead of time.
This is, we come again to the preparation part of the negotiation, Katie.
And you said that was
to
80%.
and to you know, dance with all that identity elements that can be really heavy for us as persons when we are negotiating. As negotiators, we have one element is to always focus on your zone of possible agreements and your common objective, you know, so what I'm doing here and what's the objective here. So I can disagree on that, and just put a doubt and not a certainty on the interpretation of the situation. And just, you know, it's like when you are cleaning the house and there are some things that you don't know where to put them right now, so you put it in the entrance of the apartment and say, okay, I will look at it later. So do that without situations. I don't know how to interpret that because I know that there is a cultural bias here playing. So I just put that aside and I will analyze it later on if it's positive or negative thing for me or for the negotiation, and keep going on what's the element, what's the objective that we have in common and that we need to make grow in this negotiation.
So beautifully put. I can tell that you're really passionate about this topic, Paula. I'd love to ask you so many more questions. I'd be like, let us go through the training. I want to know everything. I actually once read a brief course on negotiation before I had a negotiation thing I had to do. I did learn quite a few things about trade-offs that I never thought of. So people who don't know about negotiation, they always think it's money and they don't think about the trade-offs. But I think it's such a fascinating topic. We only have a few minutes left. What are your last words on this topic for people who want to find out more, for people who are interested in the topic of negotiation? How would you like to end today's episode?
I'm going to end with the last tip. And this one will be particularly for women, because, well, there are a lot of reasons why we like or feel less comfortable to negotiate. I also help women to negotiate on the professional work, and particularly also their salaries. And if there's one tip that will help you to be better or feel at least a little bit more comfortable in negotiation, is to train yourself with the male or with the partner that you know will represent the person that maybe intimidates you, makes you feel less comfortable. And more than anything, to say and to repeat what you are going to ask, because in that way, and the real moment when the negotiation will happen, all your body will be busy to handle all the stress hormones, the cortisol and adrenaline, but also other part of your body will know the sentence that you have to say and how to say it in the calm and familiar way. So if you are stressed and it's the first time that you are asking for a 10% rise, and you see the difference. So if I'm stressed, I'm focusing on breathing slowly, but I'm able to say that I'm asking for 10% raise, you know, it's not as familiar and comfortable like when we are talking, you and I, but still it's a little bit smoother than the first one when I'm really stressed, because I'm handling the stress in my body and the stress in my tone. So if you have to master one thing, master your tone.
Yes, wonderful. I think that's fantastic. And I think preparation, like you said, and role playing, and even just role playing in the mind and saying it out loud to yourself is better than not at all.
Exactly, totally agree.
I've done this a few times where before a talk, I've repeated 5, 6, 7 times in the room how I say it super calmly. And I think that really helps. Like you said, it makes it more fluid when it comes out and not as, jickery somehow. So I think that's a wonderful piece of advice. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Paula. I've learned so much. It's been super interesting. Thank you for your lovely energy. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much.